Welcome back to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our watch club for Marvel's What If? Well, just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, we gotta go to Jersey. Welcome to Watch Club. My name is Nate, and I'll be your guide through these alternate realities in this Watch Club for What If, Episode 5, titled, What If Zombies? If you're joining us for the first time, this is Watch Club, our weekly review series, kind of like a book club, but way better. Keep in mind, we will be going into full spoilers for this series and the MCU in general, so if you haven't watched this week's episode, you have to wonder, what if you did? And then came back right here to join us for some interdimensional conversation. Now, before we're all turned into undead zombies, let me introduce you to the lovely versions of hosts joining us today. First up, he's Undead Justin.
Happy Hungry Hogan, everyone.
Hungry Hogan. But what if he was slightly louder and just a little more bloodthirsty? He'd be Hungry Hudson. I mean, Kevin Hudson.
Hungry Kevin. If you had said that, I would have been upset.
Yes, no. Don't worry. I made sure. I had an alternate take for this, but we didn't use it. And, you know, he's Kevin Hudson, but what if he was slightly shorter, much higher, and had longer hair on top of his decaying skull? He'd be Darcy Hudson.
I'm not even a zombie. I just have a decaying skull. I'm sorry. You skipped the part.
How are you lovely dead people doing this evening?
Yes. Let's discuss.
We will. I mean, we finally got this zombie episode that we've thought about ever since we saw the initial trailer for this series. So I'm dying to chew into this episode with you guys. But before we do, let's go over the intro here. Dr. Bruce Banner, the human hiding within the Hulk, fell from the stars to warn humanity of imminent danger. But the world he found was not one he recognized. Like too many great catastrophes, this one sprang from a place of love and hope. And ironically, it was the Avengers' heroism that sealed humanity's fate. Because once Earth's mightiest heroes joined the infected, no one else stood a chance. Unless, of course, they knew the rules. All right, so guys, we're going to bite into this and kind of go over our high-level thoughts on the episode. You know what, Darcy, why don't you kick us off on this one? I'd love to know what you maybe thought of kind of, we've been talking about zombies. You got me into the zombies comic book as we discussed last week. What did you think of this episode?
I thought it was an awesome way to bring this stuff to the screen. A lot of homages to the original series and many follow-ups after that. So I thought it was really cool that they definitely read that stuff, but completely told a different story and how that came to be. So I thought really neat to see. Really neat to see that, and I'm excited to talk more about it in detail. Love the episode.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I'd love to. If as we go along, your famous catchphrase, "Don't use it yet."
I know. I
give you so much permission because even I caught a few things, and I've only read about 5 issues of that series. So very cool.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I haven't read the Zombies series from Marvel, but I obviously know that people love that series within the Marvel comics. But it was nice to see how they brought that over to the MCU. I think it was very cool to see this sort of ragtag crew in what looked to be like Marvel's zombie movie. Right? It was very much a zombie style film with some great tropes that I'm sure we'll probably point out. But it felt like it was them doing their take of like a horror genre, but like more like a the Dead with Shaun of the Dead humor, right? So sure. I liked it. I really enjoyed today's episode, and it does feel less intentional as last week's episode, but it still has fun with just this idea of what if and really staying within that MCU boundaries.
Interesting. I think Kevin and I are on the other side based off of Kevin's expressions with you guys. But let me hear it, Kevin. What do you think?
Oh, just jump into assumptions, are you?
I don't know that.
Well, then maybe I'll surprise you like a zombie popping out of a dark corner, a jump scare, if you will.
Okay.
No, I don't. I'm really sort of confused about where I sit with this one. I mean, while it definitely does pay homage to that comic book series, it is vastly different, obviously, than sort of how everything takes place there. And I think another thing that almost threw me off guard a little was how almost campy and jokey they went with this, rather than sort of hitting on more of the horror elements that I think they could have. And maybe because last week's episode was very sort of horror inspired, they wanted to veer away from that. I'm not sure it bugged me, but I was just a little surprised by the comedic route that they took with a lot of those things. That said, it was definitely a step up for me from last week, and it's maybe now the one I'm most excited to see continued on going forward next season. Yeah. So definitely a hit for me.
Okay, well, I might not feel the exact same way as all of you. Listen, it was a very different direction than I assumed it would go. I thought, surprisingly, like as you said, Kevin, like a tale about an apocalyptic story of our heroes being brutally consumed by zombies was nowhere near as dark as last week's episode, and I thought it was kind of an odd juxtaposition to in terms of placing it in this spot. Like if this episode had have maybe come out after episode 2 or near another more fun episode, I thought it might have fit a little bit better there, but it was just I thought it was kind of brainless in terms of how these characters act, and I don't mean the zombies. And so I just thought, it was a lot of fun. I think it paid homage really well to the Zombies comics that we're going to get into. I thought it paid really good homage to the zombie style of movie. But for me personally, I wasn't able to suspend my disbelief enough to not get distracted by how these characters reacted to the deaths of their friends. And that just threw me off the entire time. And I don't get me wrong, I had fun with it. I thought some of the characters they brought in was really interesting. We got freaking David Dastmalchian after being Polka Dot Man coming in as Kurt. I thought there was a lot of fun with the Baba Yaga stuff. But I was so distracted by a lot of the just sort of the decisions that were made and sort of the breakneck pace for this series, for this episode. It just, I don't know, kind of bugged me.
I just want to jump in because I love what you said there in terms of where this one was placed in the scheme that we've got so far. In that they were skewing darker and darker. And then this one sort of goes that lighter. This was far more Zombieland than 28 Days Later, And
I feel like the thing is that that's what makes it really good. Like they went with the gore. Like they didn't do red, but there was an intense amount of gore, and I think it was great to come off the heels of last week's episode and introduce this to show that you can kind of go that route. I get that it might skew a little bit more comedy, but I feel like this is a comfortable area of how Marvel would do zombies, right? Like not to say that there can't be a more horrific version that could have been done, but this made sense for this series. It was actually refreshing to see that they didn't necessarily take that plunge, even more so being oh yeah, you thought last week's episode was scary? Wait till you see this.
I think, even we see Scott Lang again in the episode. He says it best in that when he deals with trauma by resorting to dad jokes. Yeah. And humor is a very common way to resort to, and all these people that we see surviving are the ones who are quick-witted, the ones who are thinkers on their own. Everyone that was on that ragtag survival team is someone who will fight for themselves, basically. And then it was interesting to see that pair up. Again, I think the humor was necessary to tell such a dark story, because without it, it'd be very, very hard to watch and stomach.
And wouldn't it come off cheesy then too? If they really leaned hard into super scary, it might skew more anime. I don't know. I feel like they played a style of zombie movie in this episode that's very comedy meets horror gore, right? That balance between the two. We talked about that in our Army of the Dead sort of recap, where we talked about some of those tropes.
Yeah, no, and I get that. I understand that. It just felt like narratively we talk about, how we want these series to sort of progress a little further, and I get this. This is what we originally thought was an anthology series, and now with the Watcher starting to kind of come a little bit more into play in the previous episode, I just was under the impression that we were going to start to sort of see that snowball kick off. We were going to start to see the sort of more and more intentional storylines, whereas this feels like it's kind of out of place so far. And listen, if next week we get an episode that is, the Thor party episode or whatever it might be, if we get an episode that's going to be kind of not really falling into that narrative through point that we were expecting, or that we're kind of expecting the series to go towards, that's totally fine. Then that's fine if that's what they want the series to be. It was just a little disappointing just to see that this episode felt like they didn't think enough about the characters' actions and the way that they sort of reacted to these moments, and also the overall impact that this story has. Because we're going to get to a question a little bit later on, and regarding whether we want to come back to this, and I don't know if I do yet or not. I don't know.
I can comment on both those things, and again, one of those I'll talk about later on, but both of them come back to how the original comic plays out. First off, it's a very comedic take on the whole zombie trope anyways. They're still sentient to a point where they know how to use their powers and stuff like that. That clearly is, they're smarter than the average zombie, so that again comes straight from the comics. And where this episode ends definitely plays towards where that comic origin as well. So I feel like the humor was intentional, because to tell the story of Marvel Zombies, it has to be kind of tongue-in-cheek, like, this is happening, so just, like, we gotta deal with it. And another thing is, the reason why I'm okay with the way the characters are reacting is, it's 2 weeks' time, basically. You gotta think about when Ant-Man took place, and when they would have gone to get Janet out of the quantum realm. So it's a very fast-acting thing. So you have to get over the deaths of these people really quickly, otherwise you're going to die too.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very important thing.
It's
survival of the fittest.
But you have to do that from literally 10 seconds, the scene before, you're mourning over someone, and then 10 seconds later, you make a joke. Like, there's a certain level of...
in that regard,
there's a certain level of pace that I'm okay with, and this just wasn't it. And again, all this is just my opinion, boys. Relax. Don't eat me alive, okay? We're going to start off with a question, a writing question, actually, as far as questions are concerned. And this one comes in from friend of the show, Megan Clara Draws, who writes in just like you can and asks, if you could choose one hero to keep you safe during a zombie apocalypse, who would you choose? Kevin, let's start with you.
Based on this episode alone, I think the best looking hero in terms of how he fared against the zombies was Hulk. We don't even know what happens to Bruce by the end of this episode. So I think if anybody's going to be able to survive a horde or whatever and not take any damage, it looked like him more than even some of the other characters. So that would be my just quick choice.
And I haven't read it, but I've heard things. And Banner does eat zombies as zombie Hulk, and then turns into Banner and then blows up, right? Like
his stomach can't contain what the Hulk ate, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
One of my favorite things. He only hulks out when he's hungry now,
right?
And once he's sated, he goes back to Banner and
explodes. What a missed opportunity not to do that twice in this series, right?
Twice in the series.
I feel like that'd be a bit gory. In terms of I have two options. If we're going MCU, I'd say Thor. Always want a god on your side, and with his lightning powers, he can take out vast armies, as we've seen him do multiple occasions.
Yeah, where is he?
He's my...
Oh yeah,
he's still floating in space with Guardians right now. They're trying to figure out what's going on it there. They're safe for now. But if we're going to strictly comics, which I kind of want to, I'm going to probably go with Multiple Man from the X-Men. He's just a guy who can create infinite copies of himself. So he's a one-man army, and as soon as one gets infected, just kill that one, and then he's still good. He's got an infinite body of meat shields. As long as the original man does not get infected, you're good. So,
see, my fear is that you would just create another army, like you have, one zombie army, one multiple man army, and now two zombie armies.
Well, he can dismiss any of his copies at will.
Oh, okay.
So once they get infected, it's just poof, they're gone type thing.
Thank goodness.
At least that's one of the iteration I'm most familiar with that does that.
Justin, how about yourself?
I'd probably say Bucky, based on this episode, right? Like, if I'm thinking, he handled himself pretty well, and man, he wore that shield like he knows he's the next Cap, right? Like,
I mean, speaking of wearing something, we got to see him in his quote unquote birthday suit with that luscious hair in the shower. I was like, okay, Bucky, but for myself, you know what? I want the nice, strong arms of Paul Bettany to hold me tight with his the stone in his head.
He feed you to Wanda though. Like,
I would no. I would replace Wanda in this scenario. I would find a way to reprogram him to think that I'm Wanda, and we just live on together forever.
Hey, that's a good Halloween costume. You as Wanda.
I think you're underestimating how sophisticated technology vision is. You can't just hack him.
He's not going to be swooned when you're charmed like we are, so don't worry.
I think you're right. Guys, last week we got a new multiversal term known as an absolute point. Do you think that this is another indication of an absolute point in time? And also, did you notice who caused this specific episode's event to occur?
I never really got the feeling it was an absolute point. I mean, unless we're considering all these what if scenarios an absolute point. Like this is just another avenue of adventure that came from, Janet, which I thought was a really unique way of bringing it, into the universe, was this quantum virus, which again, we don't know much about the quantum realm, so it could very well be a thing in the main timeline. We're lucky enough not to have her catch it.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's two things that are interesting. I think the question might pertain more so just to the idea of the gauntlet and Thanos and his sort of exploration of the stones and actually getting to the realization, even as a zombie, as we saw, and we will discuss obviously further. But, I think that's really, really interesting, is to see it now that it is still something that takes place, but in this zombie world, right? It is an absolute point to a certain degree. But with Janet, I think it's interesting because by implying that it is a quantum realm sort of thing, it does serve as a really easy way for them to kind of cross over to the cinematic if they did somehow in Quantum Mania land up in some sort of zombie.
I was wondering because this is the second Pym situation that we've gotten so far. So we've seen a lot of emphasis on Doctor Strange, a little, in that last episode. We've seen a lot of emphasis on the Watcher. And so far we've seen a lot of emphasis on the Pyms. It just seems kind of
it's kind of Pymmy.
Well, yeah, stay away from Hank Pym in the What If universe. That guy is bringing nothing but bad luck, man.
Seriously.
Nothing but bad luck. But I did like that it was, again, things were obviously changed quite a bit from the comics, but it was sort of a nod to another interdimensional character bringing this virus over just in a different fashion. So that was a cool way to do it without completely recreating the events of the comic.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of those comics, we did get to see, and Darcy, let me know, T'Challa.
Yeah,
right.
That was the biggest one. Well, the first one I wanted to talk about was just Peter's appearance in this episode.
Yeah,
him saving Banner under the arm, swinging, was straight from the first issue's cover. Yeah. Except he's not a zombie in this timeline or
Thank goodness.
Portrayal. So I thought it was a really cool nod right off the bat, almost to this is we've read the story, so we're going to tell it in a different way. I thought it was really cool, and the T'Challa thing again is straight up from the comics. And again, if we are saying stay away from Hank Pym, I think it's even further to be stay away from Hank Pym, in that in the comics it's Hank Pym who's keeping him alive to retain his mental facilities. Basically, as he's becoming the zombie, he's like, I need meat, so I'm going to eat T'Challa's leg. Yeah, and then eventually Janet finds out and gets her head bit off. That's the kickoff of one of my favorite. Again, I love the Marvel zombie stories, so that kickoff is one of my favorite turning points.
There you go.
Now, you did mention Spider-Man, so I want to jump in here. Was anybody else either bummed or surprised that Tom Holland wasn't in this episode? That seemed like a weird choice.
It was bummed, but I think it has everything to do with that Sony has the agreement, not Marvel. Sony has the agreement with Tom Holland. I imagine...
So he can only appear in the movies that Sony would be profiting from. I think you solved it there.
I think that's it.
It wasn't a terrible impression of Tom Holland. It just sounded like Tom Holland when he's 10 or 15 years old and trying to be a kid again. Yeah. It sounds like someone older trying to be younger, whereas Tom Holland is just naturally the young guy. Yeah. So it just that's where the disconnect came for me.
Yeah, I think it would have been super cool if we did get Yuri Lowenthal as the voice. If you do want to find a way to tie it in to another Peter Parker that people are used to, that might have been pretty cool.
But I think it goes without saying, obviously they weren't able to get everyone through this series, right? I wonder if Tom Holland is really that agreement that he has a live action deal and he won't do the voice. But at the same time, you could see that if they're on such good relationships, it's a day of work, not even for him to record those lines, right? So it is kind of puzzling, but I feel like his contract is probably the reason why that didn't happen.
Now, speaking of Peter Parker, we find that this episode does actually spend a significant amount of time with Peter, and we actually got our first mention of Uncle Ben in the MCU.
Good catch,
and it was in this episode of all places. So with that, I want to ask, do you think that Uncle Ben was actually eaten by a zombie in this universe?
No, he wouldn't have died 2 weeks earlier.
No.
No. It would have happened before Civil War.
Yeah. That's a good call out. I guess it
was over a short 2 week period.
Yeah. But it's weird though. It's weird though that we've never even heard him in the live action MCU yet. Uncle Ben is mentioned here for the first time,
and a strange.
Yeah,
spot,
it's a bit weird, right? I thought that was.
Well, I thought even weirder was mentioning Tony. that he'd lost Tony as well, because I mean, he would have lost him in the zombie apocalypse here, and not at the end of Endgame, where we're used to seeing that happen. And so I just thought it was a weird character to reference, given everything going on.
Well, still a father figure. Right, like it's still he's
Yes,
still
of
a father figure to him, regardless of, because you're right. We didn't have the events Infinity War and Endgame, but regardless, even where Peter was at his development as Spider-Man, Tony was already like very much a father figure. So I could see that still having like that weight and significance to it. Like Happy
sure,
too.
But that's where that confusion, I think, even on Nate's part there, came in that because they're lumping these characters who all died very different ways, into the same sort of thought for him. It was a weird choice.
Yeah.
I think it was just to show like how you have to get over like what has happened has happened. You can't change the fact, and the people who have died would not want you to live that way. So I totally understand why they went that route entirely, and the names they dropped just to me has had that significance and meaning for Peter to be like, I've dealt with loss before, and I know that it gets better. You just got to keep going through it type thing. So I understood why that whole speech took place.
Yeah, but I mean, with the whole aspect of like, people dying and thinking about them. One of my sort of favorite moments of the zombies comic books, and again, I understand this is very different and they're not necessarily going for the exact same thing, but I loved sort of seeing the characters, even though they were zombies and they were mindless, they did take a few moments to sort of think about the fact that they had eaten their own loved ones. And I just thought, like, how cool would it be if maybe the reveal of sort of seeing that Vision can undo some of this zombification, if that was, a moment with a character to kind of get to see them realize, maybe Peter realizes like he ate his aunt or whatever, right? And or something along those lines, right? I just thought it would be a really interesting thing to bring in, but again, it just felt so much like, oh, they died, okay, and then a joke, and then we go to the next scene, and then action.
This was novelty for the sake of novelty, right? Like
yeah,
it was very much that. So I get why you might feel a little butthurt about it. So
for sure. I mean, it feels like a zombie bit me right in the butt.
Yeah. Well, just before we like abandon ship on this Peter Parker thing, I thought it was cool seeing some visual iconography of his costume with the cape on. Given that we who knows what will happen in No Way Home, but it was cool to get like a little, maybe a foreshadow of maybe seeing something like that.
I just thought it was cool because the last time we saw Peter interact with the cape, he got completely snubbed when he went for a handshake and the cape just flew away from him. So the cape carries better in this universe.
They're friends now.
Also, the continuity from last week's episode to this week's episode. The cloak of levitation. Thank you very much.
It's its own character and not just some
the thread
piece
that
of fabric.
ties these two, right? Like, and it's fitting.
Oh, jeez, Justin.
Yo, you could stretch. I could stretch, bro.
You could stretch that thread any way you want. But I think, I mean, getting the Doctor Strange references in with Peter. But Darcy, I'm confused. Is this the moment that we saw? Is this the only time we're going to see the Peter with the cloak? Because I thought that we had talked about in previous weeks that you were amped to sort of see Peter take on the cloak, and that might have been like an entire episode, or were we not expecting that?
No, I didn't know where we were going to see Peter, or let alone the head of Scott Lang. So to see that like these things were just cool to be like, oh, that's where it's coming from. So it's neat how they're kind of subverting my expectations of where these images from the trailers are coming from, at least. So it's right. I enjoyed that. Again, the kind of surprise, if you will.
Okay.
Well, and it was kind of cool that, not to jump too far ahead here, but you did mention Scott and being the head. Mm-hmm. How in the comics it was Janet, wasn't it?
Yes.
Who was the head? So that's kind of cool that they kept it in that circle.
Yeah.
But
she was a head that ended up getting a robot body, and she and Black Panther escape to try and save humanity because she might be zombie, but she can't eat anything. And is not dumb. I don't know. It's cool. The comic is very weird. I mean, the characters were introduced in a Fantastic Four written by Mark Miller, where Reed Richards meets an alternate Reed Richards, where they're trying to spread the virus to other dimensions, and then we see it again when they picked up Kirkman of Walking Dead fame to write the limited series. So the fact that we got like so many stories to come from the minds of those two guys, kind of just doing it for a laugh, is very interesting, and seeing how again they're drawing from that for the show. It's really cool.
Right. Well, speaking of heads, Each week we like to keep tabs on that big-headed boy Uatu in a segment we call Watcher Watch. So, Justin, where did we see that bulbous cranium this week?
Well, I believe we saw him in the scene that Darcy had referenced that mirrored the comic, the first issue comic cover, where Spider-Man is swinging through the cities with Banner, and he's narrating, obviously, how they got in this situation with this what if. So that's the only instance that I saw of him. It was fitting, again, in the landscape, in sort of like this sort of elusive sort of
it's like his whole face across the whole
right, and there was more detail rather than just a silhouette in this case. So again, to kind of go back to this idea of like what you were saying, he's kind of getting closer
and closer,
right?
Well, because that's the first time we visibly see him narrating, right?
Yes,
I think. Yeah.
We also do see him again later on in the episode. I think it's when he's looking over Camp Lehigh, or when they're approaching Lehigh.
Yeah.
You see him again in the sky.
You're right.
It's, again, the same thing where you can see skin tone, whereas before he was just shadow and vagueness with an outline. We're seeing very crisp. Like there's the blue clake, like the blue. You get this guy's blue sash on or whatever, and then the skin tone almost kind of blending into the sky a bit. So I thought that was he's definitely getting closer and can't stay uninvolved for much longer is what I'm getting.
He's starting to lose it, I think, right? I think he's starting to become
he's
a little
the darker
unkept.
and darker.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm done with dark. I need to see light again.
Yeah. He needs to go back and rewatch episode 2 of this series. I'm telling you.
No, he'll find it when he finds Party Thor, for sure. That's
Party Thor.
Party Thor's going to be like that, like comedic buffer. That's just going to be like, yeah, that's a episode 2 like relive right there.
Redo, yeah. Well, listen. At the end of this story, we see the cliffhanger of a zombie Thanos. So my question for all of you is, would we want to see more of this group? And my other question: do you think a zombie Thanos would still snap? And if so, how would his zombification change the outcome of this snap? Darcy?
Well, I totally think he's still going to snap. Because again, if we're going from the comics inspiration where those zombies were targeting superhuman beings for a specific reason, and that reason was to break the multidimensional barrier, I think, having the Infinity Gauntlet, the snap might not be eradicate half the universe. It might be give me more universes, give me more food to find.
Sure.
So
Oh, wow.
that
makes sense.
My whole thought was maybe this is the big bad that the Watcher is going to be assembling the people to fight.
Well,
because,
it's possible.
Again, like this thing is they're a multidimensional threat in the comics, and it'd be strange to have them not do that again because again they're clearly paying a lot of homage to those original things. So I think it'd be very cool if this is something that they have to go back and fight at some point.
Interesting.
Okay, I have a separate question about Thanos here. How does this man get the Time Stone?
Yeah.
The way I saw it was that he was following Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian to New York because that's where they were going first. And when he gets there, maybe he's eaten, or maybe he's just goes straight to the time gem and then gets eaten. I don't know. It's along those lines of he was already going there. So I'm not surprised that he just picked it up off of either the ground or corpse Strange's body, wherever it was.
Yeah,
it was easy pickings for him, in my opinion.
That's too easy an answer. I don't like it.
It just blows my mind that Thanos would be overtaken by these zombies. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I know there's a lot of them, but like that just seems crazy.
I mean, we clearly saw that he doesn't have the microscopic vision that is required to withstand an Ant-Man or Hank Pym size zombie. So there's Janet came back too. So we've got more than one shrinking zombie on the loose. Not a far stretch to see one get onto his neck. Like that's, in my opinion, no one's safe in the super universe or the Marvel universe. Anyone's up for grabs as a zombie.
And I mean, for those who were fans of the whole theory of Ant-Man going up the butt of Thanos and then exploding him from the inside out, we kind of did get. We kind of did
different
get that
spins
payoff
on it, basically.
Yeah.
We got the Hulk one earlier, and now we're getting Sharon all over Hope there.
Jeez. Ugh. Not how I wanted that to go.
I think seeing the gauntlet and seeing the amount of stones that he had, even though he was a zombie, really does just kind of hit home this idea that it is an absolute point for the MCU. It is another one of those absolute points, just coming off of last week's episode, especially with the
snap itself.
Yes, the snap itself, and the idea that it would inevitably happen. How it might play out might be different, but with that, I think you can see it in the mirroring of the events, right? Like the quantum realm with Janet at the beginning, leading to obviously this virus that inspires it all. And then also, going even further, finding Vision and Wanda, finding Vision, trying to help and save Wanda, and the fact that that's the last stone that Thanos needs. So this episode does a really good job of very much going through same sort of events with the same characters, even the him killing himself and ripping the stone out,
and you see his eyes
exactly, right? Like you see his eyes. The way it falls into his head is very similar to how it was in the movie. So I just feel like everything that happens, yes, it was just a take with zombies, but it was like similar characters, similar sort of events, and those people that were integral in those events are also here, but in different capacities.
It's interesting because you're legitimizing, you're kind of going against what I was mentioning earlier of me thinking like this series doesn't have that much of an impact, at least on this series going forward. Maybe not the MCU, but this series going forward. So, if Zombie Thanos is the big bad, I guess that's kind of interesting. It would just make me a little bit upset because we've already gotten Thanos as the big bad, right? And I get that it's a spin on it, but it just maybe I was hoping for something a little more grandiose.
Yeah, I mean, again, with the snap yet to happen, I don't know if I feel like Thanos getting the stones was always going to be his goal, and again, I feel like if we're going to be looking at the comics, he's driven by the hunger more than anything else now. So maybe the snap is, like I said, open up more universes for him to feed on, or maybe it's just give me back my brain, like let me think again. So I those are the two ways I can see him snapping: is either like stop this from happening to me, or give me more food. I don't know if he's still going to be going snap and get rid of half the people on the universe, because again, that would now reduce the food source for this virus. So
right.
Well, and I also think that we need to get used to this show only having characters we've been introduced to before. I don't think this is the avenue they're going to suddenly introduce a big bad like Galactus or something. And they're obviously going to save that sort of thing for the MCU.
Cinematic,
yeah. Thank you for saying Galactus too, because that's another thing. Into the most recent Marvel Zombies comic storyline, I think it's Zombie Origins is the name or something like that. The hunger started with Galactus, and that's where
Devouring
the virus came
planets,
from. Is because he has this internal hunger within him, and it turns out that's just another in the comics, another multidimensional being is the hunger, and he just wants to consume everything. So it's cool to see how many times I can call back to Galactus just from this series alone, because there's massive ties to the Fantastic Four throughout the whole zombie storyline, and even in some of the past episodes, some nods to the Galactus origins and stuff like that. It's really cool to think about that, but I don't see them being like, and Galactus exists in this type of format.
No, I definitely I agree with Kevin wholeheartedly there that you're not going to see the introduction of new characters. We're going to see only the characters that we have seen in the MCU, right? Very much like, we look at something like Civil War, right, which was inspired by a comic book series that was very well received, and they did their take of Civil War in the MCU. This is how I look at this episode, right? Like, this episode is their zombie take of MCU zombies with characters and their own sort of stylistic sort of approach to it that is to be different from the comic book series. Now, that isn't to say, though, that, as we get further down this rabbit hole of Phase 4 and where we're going for Phase 5 and so on, if we get to a Galactus that we might revisit this, we might see that, maybe that's where this thing came from, that infected Janet, right? Like, we go deeper. Who knows, right? What if? Right. So I feel like the reality is that, like, while some people might like have anticipated or maybe wanted to see something maybe a little bit more in vein of the comics, maybe not the events, but just the style of horror, I feel like they did their own version really, really well here with it. Right. Even leading up to like seeing Thanos. Again, Nate, to your point, someone we have already seen, we've recognized the big baddie of the MCU that we've already had, right? Holding that gauntlet, but he's a zombie. Like, that's pretty cool, right? Like, that was interesting.
I'm scared all over.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That gave me
they're telling their own story.
Feeling as him completing the gauntlet and seeing Thanos zombified with 5 of 6 already gave me the same chills, basically. So I thought it was executed really well.
See, I mean, if the series is going to make sort of a clean break, I might even be more amped for Zombie Thanos, but then you've also got, President Loki, you've got Hank Pym, right? You've got like maybe a bunch of these sort of negative outcomes all coming into one, just like how I'm hoping we'll get to see all our heroes from these series kind of come into one big giant battle at the end, and then just, that's it. And then you end it. It's one and done, one season. I don't know. I think that would be maybe a little bit more of a creative way to approach
but
it
you
than
want
just
that
doing
through
Thanos
point.
again.
I think that's you want that through point. You want there to
Right.
be like
I'm
some sort of
hoping.
connectivity.
I'm hoping.
Yeah,
I'm hoping.
And I think based on trailers that we've spoiled for ourselves, we've seen,
Right.
we know that that's going to come, and I think the thing that we need to do is obviously take each episode as those strides as to where they're trying to go with it. But this does feel, non-intentional for the purpose of being non-intentional, and just a fun take on, blending that series into this universe.
Totally.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say again, I wasn't expecting to see Chadwick Boseman appear again in the MCU. I thought the second episode was that character was the last time we'd see him. So I thought it was really fitting to have him talk about or bring back, the death is not the end. They're always with us. The quotes from the original Civil War and stuff like that. I thought it was a really cool way to remind us and to be like, even though we've lost him, the memory of Black Panther will live on forever and stuff like that. So I thought it was really cool. And again, a cool nod towards that. So
very good.
I just wanted to shout that out before we move on.
And speaking of Chadwick, minus probably Hudson Thames, which I did think was really distracting, just because I'm not used to yet another Peter voice. I did think the voice acting in this episode was actually one of the highlights for the episode. I did think a lot of even though there were kind of silly one-liners, we got a lot, like so many original cast members into this. As we mentioned before, even David Dastmalchian coming back as Kurt. It was kind of cool to hear a lot of those voices, and I think it made up for not getting Tom, but Holland, that is. There's so many Toms. But listen, I am so hungry. I am hungry, and I want to know, I hunger for your overall thoughts and final score, which for this episode, we're going to be rating on a scale of 1 to 5 undead heroes. And Kevin, why don't you kick us off on this one?
Sure, I'd love to. I was a little confused by some of the storytelling decisions they used, but that didn't stop it from being a really, really fun, engaging episode. It's definitely one of my favorites of the series so far, and the one that, based on the ending alone, I can't wait to see the conclusion. And I think, we mentioned it at some point in the show here, how Thor is still out there, the Guardians are still out there, and if this has only been contained on Earth, we could still get them coming back to discover what's gone on and to try and help protect that sixth and final Infinity Stone from zombie Thanos getting his hands on it. So, again, if there are any of the stories we've seen so far, this is the one I'd like to see a part 2 for. But no, I think this was, definitely right up there with my favorites. I mean, I even just think, sure, we saw it in the trailer, and it's in the opening title sequence, but that shot of Captain America on the train from being on the roof to making that first appearance, that was so well done. That was probably my favorite singular moment of the episode. It was just so cool looking. I'm going to give this one a solid 4.2 out of 5 undead heroes.
All right. Wow. Okay. Darcy, how about yourself?
I'm going to sound like a broken record because I love this episode just as much as I like the other two.
Jeez.
Like the last two, they're knocking out the ballpark in terms of like comic storylines brought to the screen, and that, as a fan of comics, first and foremost, I'm loving it even more than the movies. It seems, just because it's all these ideas I never thought we'd get being animated and brought to life in a very unique and like. I love it. I love the way it's done. It's great. So again, I love all the nods to the original comic series and some of the cinematic moments where like they come out of the sling rings opening and you get Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and Wong, and the Avengers theme, and then it kind of just cuts off and you get that weird horror choir music. Again, some of the timing and moments in this episode were just like chill inducing, and I thought it was so cool the way that they were, again, balanced it with the humor to make it sure that it wasn't going too far down that dark path. So again, 5 out of 5 undead heroes from this guy. So that's 3 in a row. Let's see if they can keep doing it, because
that's the hat trick. That's the hat trick.
Jeez.
Holy shit.
Well, listen, like an undead Wong, I'm actually going to use my sling ring and jump right in because I'm going to go before Justin. What?
Oh, okay.
Gasp.
Listen, well, just because honestly, I'm going to go a little negative. I want to end on a positive. So I thought, again, the visuals, freaking dope. There were some really dope things to see in this episode. There were a lot of fun moments. There was a lot of good comedic lines. And there was just, it was fun. It was a zombie thing, but it just felt a little too mindless for me. I really think, Like, this episode, more than any other we've seen so far, I think actually suffered from the breakneck pacing of the series instead of enhancing the experience like it usually does. I think it stumbles along from moment to moment with very little character impact or even reaction. And I think it had fun moments, but it was just too unbelievable how each character moved from moment to moment. It was just inconsistent. Like from a standpoint of if it was all dramatic, dope. If it was all comedic, awesome. But, I think it would have worked much better that way. But instead, you're getting characters, again, as I mentioned, mourning the loss of their friends and loved ones, and then 10 seconds later, they're cracking jokes. So it has some really smart references. I love the callbacks to Marvel Zombies, again, and I love how that's great for the comic fans. But overall, this was my least favorite episode of the series so far, and I'm going to have to give it 3 out of 5 undead heroes. So I'm sorry to come across as the bad guy. But every now and then, sometimes these things don't quite hit for me. And this was that episode. But I mean, even a 3 out of 5. Come on, guys.
Yeah, that's not the lowest score. I was expecting you to go lower.
I'm just surprised though at how much. I'm just surprised at how much much disdain you have for it, right? Like, I think again, this is one of those situations that it probably would have benefited for Nate if it was like a 2-hour movie, right? Like, you would have been able to soak in those character moments and see them actually, and
spend more time with them.
Sure, exactly.
And I get it. They only have half an hour. That's the format of the series. Too much. No. I get it, Justin. I'm just saying it's not for me. Don't worry.
The pacing always makes me think of comics too, because in comics you get 5 issues and they tell this massive storyline that has impacts for the whole universe. So the fast speed of storytelling is no stranger for a comic book reader, because again, they have so little time to tell a story. They kind of hit on the big points and then move on, and that's kind of just the way that comics are always written, at least from my perspective.
Well, I love this episode. I was actually surprised at how much I liked this episode. I didn't think I was going to like it as much, only because I did think that, they were just going to play up this zombie quality and just be horror for the sake of horror. But they skewed, obviously, far more the humor side, finding a fine balance between something like a Dawn of the Dead meets a Shaun of the Dead. It's a zombie style flick with this ragtag crew. It's funny and dark and horrific at times, even with just the level of gore I thought that they implemented without necessarily showing blood. Bravo, Disney. But it does continue some of the themes from last week, but it's far less impactful on the overall series, as Nate has already pointed out. But it was fun. As I've already said, like, this was the MCU's version of the zombies in a visual medium form. They know the comics series is so appreciated, and they don't have access to all those characters and can't do that story. Who knows, down the road they could, but for now, we got our MCU depiction of zombies really, really well. And, they did such a great job of playing up those tropes of, traditional zombie movies, right? We got the jump scares, we got the needless splitting up, characters returning from the dead, just so much that they did really, really well. And also with that, they did a really good job in this story of finding a way to kind of stay parallel with the events that we know have happened in the MCU, with obviously the very apparent twist and making it relevant for this story. So yeah, I love this episode. I'm going to give it 5 out of 5 undead heroes.
Well, I have an absolute point for the, which is basically the end of this episode is an absolute point. So that's it for the 5th episode of our Watch Club for Marvel's What If. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Watch Club. And if you did, make sure to subscribe to us wherever you like to listen to podcasts, if you haven't already. And you might ponder the question, what if you want to write into the show with your thoughts or predictions on the shows we cover in Watch Club, just like Megan Clara Draws did this week? Well, listen, I'm going to throw that question over to our resident timekeeper, Undead Justin.
They can reach us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com.
Well, listen, keep in mind, we also have a ton of other episodes covering the latest content released on Disney+, out now, including our spoiler-free and spoiler-filled review for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and Darcy got a chance to join us for our spoiler-filled review, so that was a lot of fun. We also have our spoiler-free everything Marvel. You're a Marvel apologist, Darcy.
Yep,
Jeez, just give everything a 5. Holy crap. We also have our spoiler-free review for Only Murders in the Building, and we dropped our trailer drop with our thoughts on immediate reaction to the trailer for Spider-Man No Way Home. We also are going to have a trailer drop coming very soon. Maybe if you follow the White Rabbit and take the right pill, you might be able to listen to that trailer drop coming out very soon. So look forward to that. Make sure you give those episodes a listen and a 5-star review if you don't mind. Justin, Darcy, Kevin, thank you so much for joining me for this Watch Club. And even though we do not, cannot, and will not interfere, we are
The Watchers.